Welcome back to another episode of the Casey Campbell podcast. Casey Campbell with you, of course. Pleased to be joined, as always, by Taylor Kitchen of TobyChristie.com and, of course, the Above the Yellow Line crew, the big leader of the Above the Yellow Line crew, because it is a crew. I don't know if you
It
know
is.
that. It is. If you get Taylor, you get all her friends too. So
Absolutely.
today we're going to be talking about. Yesterday, if you watched the channel, we talked about the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Today we're actually going to be talking about the NASCAR Cup Series. The Cup Series was supposed to go first, but scheduling issues kind of postponed it to today. So there we go. Biggest storylines heading into the Cup Series season. Well, first off, how are you, Taylor?
I'm doing great. I hope you're doing well as
Trying.
well. Happy New Year.
You're welcome to 2023.
Yes. Oh gosh.
So, yeah. Well, it's gonna be a big year for the Cup Series.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, let's start off with the obvious. Biggest storylines you think are heading into this season? This
I
could be
mean,
schedule, driver changes, all that.
well, for me, one, if we're talking about schedule, it's the Chicago Street Course. How is that going to play out? Going in with practice, or like what can we expect? That's a big storyline, track wise, schedule wise. For me, the key storyline with the drivers has to be Kyle Busch. I mean, you'd be silly to say it's not. Going from Joe Gibbs powerhouse to RCR, switching manufacturers, and then that also had a domino effect on the other series. The other Toyota drivers where they've gone as well. So that's going to be a storyline to follow. When is Kyle going to get his first win with RCR? Is he going to get a win this season? That's also another question in the air, but that's something to follow. And then obviously you have drivers that are moving up, like Noah Gragson. You have Ryan Preece back in the Cup Series full time. So, I mean, lots of interesting people to look at this season. And then obviously, too, Tyler Reddick booted from RCR to 2311. That I'm excited for. And that will be something I'm following very closely this season.
Absolutely. Let's start with we'll go by manufacturer like we did yesterday. We'll start with the blue oval. Actually, let's start with Toyota.
Okay.
Okay. Let's start with Joe Gibbs Racing. Obviously, a lot of changes there. Of course, Denny's back, Martin Truex Jr. is back, Christopher Bell is back, but Ty Gibbs, of course, takes the 54 ride, which used to be the 18. Your outlook for Joe Gibbs Racing this year?
That's tough. I think Joe Gibbs Racing and as a whole, Toyota is in a rebuilding period. Do I think they're going to win a championship this year? In my opinion, probably not. I mean, Truex, from what we saw last year with this new car, I say quotes because it's not really new anymore, wasn't what we expected. Denny, I think he's kind of at the end of his run, not like career wise, but championships. I don't think we're going to see that. Christopher Bell, though, like shocked the world. I mean, he shocked my expectations for what we saw last year. I think he can make another really strong championship run, quite honestly, if he had the same type of stamina and type of drive that we saw from him last season. And for me, Ty Gibbs, that's a question mark. I would love to say that he's going to go in guns a-blazing, but we've seen, his unfortunate situation with his father passing. How will that affect him in the car? We also had the fact, you're moving into a really big team full time. Will you learn respect on the track? How do you drive with the top drivers in the sport? And that's more so what I'm going to be looking at of Ty Gibbs this year, other than, how many top 10s, how many top 5s does he have? It's will he learn to respect those other drivers on the track? So, I mean, expectations, I would say, are pretty subpar mid for Joe Gibbs Racing. Part of my prediction is none of them make it into the championship 4, even though I think Christopher Bell can make a strong run. I just don't think this is the year for them.
Yeah. Well, I sent you all my bold predictions. So
Oh, yes.
some of them are pretty bold there.
Yes.
Let's start with 23, and then let's go to 2311. Obviously, a lot of expectations for that team. Bubba Wallace picked up a win at Kansas. Many people are saying he could have a big year. Many people are also predicting he could win the Daytona 500. Yep. And also Tyler Reddick comes to the 45 after, I'm not calling it a retirement, but Kurt Busch is not driving full time. We'll see what happens with him later this year. But overall, what are you, 2311, what's your outlook for them?
I'm excited. I think Tyler Reddick, he made the most out of that RCR equipment. It's not the top of the line equipment, but it's also not the worst equipment that you can see, but showing that he can win in that, I think he brings a lot of great assets to 2311 Racing. And I do miss, obviously Kurt Busch is going to be sticking around at 2311 and maybe various roles. One role we're not quite sure yet. but not driving full time, we don't have a veteran driver on that team kind of leading the charge. So for me, that person now is kind of Bubba Wallace. He has to take that win at Kansas and kind of say, you know what, I am the quote unquote veteran on this team. I've been on this team the longest. I'm going to lead the charge. So I'm looking for him to really make a statement this season, just because I feel like if for me, one would be great for Bubba. I want him to have two or maybe three if possible. For Tyler Reddick, I want him to go in there just like and just win. I mean, for me, I think he would be an interesting Daytona 500 pick as opposed to his teammate Bubba Wallace. I think that might be interesting to consider. But I do expect a lot of good things from Tyler Reddick. However, as we've learned, when a driver goes to a new team, we should not blow our expectations out of the water. It's a lot of pressure on them, and it's a lot of like, oh wow, we totally blew out our expectations. So, excited for them and excited for Kurt Busch if he decides to drive how many races or if he can with 2311. Excited to see what he can do. I do miss him though for sure, but yeah, exciting things for that team.
Yeah. All right, let's go from Toyota to the Blue Oval. Let's see what the outlook for Ford is. Let's start with Team Penske. Of course, they won the championship last year. No changes with that organization. Joey Logano in the 22, Brian Blaney in the 12, and Austin Cindric in the 2. Might as well we'll get the Wood brothers in here as well. They're also part of that organization. But with those 4 teams, and also no crew chief changes with either of those drivers, what's your outlook for Team Penske and also your outlook for the 21 team?
You mentioned a good point. They have no crew chief changes, and I think for them that makes them have a stronger foundation going into this season. All the other teams are making minute or big changes, right? And that's going to be a learning curve for Penske. They're the only major team really that doesn't have that learning curve in place. So that's a positive for them. We do know the trend with Joey Logano, though. It's every other year he makes the championship 4 with even number years. This is an odd year, so I don't expect him to make it to the championship 4. Ryan Blaney, my hope for him is that he has a better year than last year. We saw him have really strong runs, really good top of the points, but wasn't able to get a win besides the All-Star race, which I would count, but it wasn't for points, right? So I want him to do better. Austin Cindric, I feel like with the Daytona 500 last year, I mean, he started off on a great note. Obviously, you're winning a crown jewel race. However, he had a little bit of a slump, picked it up in the summer, and then he made it past the round of 16 for the championship fight, which was, I mean, I don't know what to expect from him. I think for me, he's the biggest wild card this year because I don't want to say he played it safe last year, but he was very steady, I would say. So really for Penske, I'm not quite sure where they're going to fit in 2023. I think they're under the radar for everybody because there are no changes, right? So they'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if they can make that a positive or really advance themselves because they have no changes.
Yeah. And of course, also, with the 21 team, what do you expect from them?
I want Harrison Burton to do better. He's had moments where he's been pretty decent for a rookie. There's been other moments where you're like, oh man, Harrison, I want I would like to see him, fighting more consistently in the top 15, top 10. I mean, obviously, Wood Brothers is not a Penske team. They're not like one of the top tier teams anymore. But I would like him to have more consistency going into 2023.
All right. Let's stick with the theme of no changes. RFK Racing, of course, that they had a lot of change last year. Of course, Brad Keselowski coming into that team. They got a win last year. It was their first win in a long time with Chris Buescher. Brad Keselowski himself did not get any wins, but there's also a lot of expectations with that team as well, and also no crew chief changes with RFK.
Yeah, for me, I love what Brad is bringing to the organization. He's bringing a lot of modern takes. He's also, I think they just got a new fitness facility yeah. So, I mean, they're really trying to make this team, more modern. And I really appreciate that. And I think Chris Buescher, whether it was what Brad brought to the team or whether Chris is just advancing in his career, which I think he is, every single year I see him getting stronger. I feel like where he's at right now in his career is the right fit for him. Obviously, we saw him get the win. I think it's not out of the question that he could fight for a win next season, maybe capture one for Brad. I'd love to see him get a win. I was very disappointed with how lackluster his season was last year. Obviously, he picked it up a little bit near the end, but he has a lot on your plate. You're a driver, you're a team owner. It's a lot to juggle. And maybe this year we'll see that he's figured out some sort of balance to where he can put a little bit more into his in-car performance. Obviously, though, we saw issues with the fours, with the tires, the fire, and sometimes it was just a matter of bad luck, right? So I'd like to see hopefully Brad Keselowski get a win. My prediction is always he's a strong candidate for a Talladega, strong candidate for Daytona. But I don't want that to just be the places where we're like, oh, Brad can win these 2 races and that's it. I want to see him like maybe he has a chance to win at Michigan or another track, you know? But I think RFK has a really strong case going into 2023, making it into the playoffs. Hopefully this year they can get the cars into the playoffs.
If anyone wants to win Michigan, it's Brad Keselowski.
Oh yeah.
From there, of course, that's the state where I'm from. Also, where Eric Jones is from too. So we'll get to the Chevy teams in a minute. Let's stick with the no changes theme. Front Row Motorsports. Well, actually, you know what? They did have a lot of changes. Their drivers, no. Their crew chiefs, yes. Of course, Michael McDowell is back in the 34. Todd Gilliland is back in the 38. But Travis Peterson is the crew chief for the 34. And help me out here. The 38 crew chief's name, I know they have a new one as well, with Seth Barber moving up to the Cups, moving up to a new position within the team. What are your thoughts on Front Row? Because the 34 team really performed last. Blake Harris took that team. Obviously, we'll talk about him in a minute too. But what are we thinking about Front Row Motorsports? Because the team also the team that won the Truck Series championship.
Right. And I think my concern is you don't have Blake Harris with that 34 team anymore. He elevated that team to new heights. Michael McDowell had a career best season. And my concern for Michael McDowell is dealing with a new crew chief. And I don't want to say dealing with, but having a new crew chief is a little bit of a concern. You know, we saw him have that career best, and I would hope that he can keep that consistency. But expectations, when you're trying to blend in with a new team, trying to mesh, you might not have the same season that you had last year. So Michael McDowell, keeping my expectations pretty mild, though I would like him to keep building off what he had. For Todd Gilliland, going off a really successful rookie season, in my opinion, I think for his first season full-time Cup Series, I think he did pretty well. So not a lot to add there, just wanting him to continue to progress. And that's the note for all of the rookies, having them progress in as they are advancing their career in the Cup Series.
Yep. And Ryan Berganti is the crew chief for Todd Gilliland. So yep. I had to
It's a pause for a second.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go with the final Ford team we're going to talk about. Stewart-Haas Racing. Of course, they had some changes last year. With Kevin Harvick's in the 4. Eric Almirola, who's supposed to retire after last year, he's back. Chase Briscoe is in the 14, and Ryan Preece is in the 41. Of course, jumping up to the Cup Series, replacing Cole Custer, who was in the Xfinity Series, who we talked about yesterday. Stewart-Haas Racing, what do you think about what they have going this year? There's going to be a lot of things going on over there.
Yeah, I think what they did, as much as I do love Cole Custer, it was a smart move for them. You know, the past few years have not been super strong. Obviously, 2020, Harvick winning left and right. You know, he had a few wins this year. Almirola didn't have a win this year, won in 2021, but they haven't been as strong as I think they should be. You know, they're considered one of the top teams in the sport, and they just haven't felt like it or acted like it. And I think the Gen 7 car maybe perplexed them a little bit. And I feel like it showed. But I expectations for Ryan Preece, I don't think he's going to win right off the bat. I don't think this will be a winning year for him, but I want him to elevate that 41 car past what Cole Custer did. That's his whole purpose going into this team is, hey, we think that Ryan Preece can make this car a winning car again. We think we can make it more consistent. That is my expectation for him, because I think that's his expectation from his team and across the board. For Chase Briscoe, I mean, he had a great season. He had a win last year, which is wild to say. And we saw some growth from him as a driver, continuing to see that. Kevin Harvick, there's rumors that this could be his last year, then he retires after this year. So if this is his final year, he could pull an Eric Almirola, but going out with a bang, you know, getting those few wins. I think maybe making a strong championship run, not like what he did this year. And for Eric Almirola, he's always a driver that perplexes me. He either has a super strong season or he's just kind of in the background. I don't want him to be in the background, especially if you said you're going to retire, then you're like, you know what? I'm going to be back for a few more seasons. I want him to show us why he's back. You know, I don't want him to bring Stewart-Haas Racing back a few levels. I really want him to keep exceeding our expectations while on that team, because he's there, he's staying there. Somebody else could take his place, but they're not. So I want him to show that he's back for a reason.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting there. The other Ford team we haven't talked about is Rick Ware Racing. Of course, they had some news this year. Of course, they're going to be technically allianced with RFK. They haven't announced their plans yet, but it is my understanding that Cody Ware will be back full time. And it looks no word yet on what the 15 car is going to do, but obviously those plans will be announced in due time. Let's go on to Chevrolet. There's a lot of Chevy teams out there. The bow tie did not. The bow tie has made some headlines this year. We'll start with let's start with RCR. Why not? Of course, let's address the elephant in the room. Austin Dillon is back in the 3, but obviously Kyle Busch is in the 8 car this year. There's been a lot of expectations with this team this year. Mm-hmm. But what do you think RCR is going to be doing in 2023?
I will say, first off, on the marketing side of things, their team has done an excellent job, like really hyping up the Kyle Busch is going to their team. You can tell that the team itself is excited. Kyle seems to be excited about the opportunity based on social media posts and everything. So first off, really saying, hey, we have one of the best drivers in the sport, and they're capitalizing on that via media, marketing, whatever it may be. Kudos to RCR first off. But I think they have themselves a gym that can really elevate their team. The question is, though, are we keeping realistic expectations for Kyle Busch? For me, I think the way to go about this, Casey, is don't have any expectations for Kyle Busch. Just don't. Just go into it with an open mind and see what he can do. Yeah. I don't think it's fair for him to be at one of the top tier teams and then expect wins left and right. That's what we all would want him to do. And for me, kind of proving Joe Gibbs wrong to be like, hey, you let me go when it was kind of a mistake is what I think we would all maybe want to see in some respect. But I'm just going to go in and just see how his season goes. Look at his stats, maybe keep a close eye. Comparing his stats to what he had at Joe Gibbs Racing, I don't think is fair either. It's different equipment, different manufacturer, different fields, different team. So I'm going in with hope for Kyle Busch, but just zero expectations, leaving it very level, just watching his season go.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what RCR does. I know a lot of people have said how many wins Kyle Busch is going to have and all that stuff. So we'll just have to see what happens with that. Let's go to Kyle Busch's former team when he was at Chevrolet. Of course, that's Hendrick Motorsports. No changes one. Of course, all 4 drivers are back. Kyle Larson in the 5. Chase Elliott in the 9, William Byron in the 24, Alex Bowman in the 48. All 3 crew 5, 9, and 24 crew chiefs are back. Obviously, Blake Harris takes over for Greg Ives, who was still at Hendrick Motorsports, but decided to come off the road. But let's talk about what are we going to expect from Hendrick this year? What should we expect from them?
What's funny about last year with Hendrick Motorsports, because of all the issues with the Gen 7 car and because of all the first time winners and everything, I feel like Hendrick Motorsports kind of sat on the back burner a little bit, but they were consistent. I think the big surprise for all of us was Kyle Larson. His championship run really fell short from, winning the championship back in 2021. So expectation for him is to kind of get back on track. Congratulations to his family, have a new baby, which is really exciting. Maybe a little bit of a motivating factor, like, all right, we're going to get some wins for our new addition to our family. I don't know, but just seeing if he can kind of get back in the groove of things. I think Chase Elliott, just fewer mistakes. I feel like last year was mistake heavy for him. Obviously, he got into the championship 4, fell short after a run-in with Ross Chastain. We won't talk about that though. But I just, less mistakes for him. I think William Byron, maybe for the whole team, less mistakes, I guess would say was my goal for Hendrick Motorsports. We saw a lot of mistakes, I feel, on pit road, maybe just some driver error. But for Blake Harris and Alex Bowman, I'm excited for that pairing. I did love Alex Bowman with Greg Ives. I thought they had really fun personalities that melded together. They got each other. So it's going to be a building year for him. I feel like we always see Alex Bowman as the weak link on the team, but if he has a strong race, I mean, he is on your radar the entire time. If you see his car running strong, obviously it's because he has a strong car, but it's things that we don't expect necessarily from Alex Bowman week in, week out. So hopefully with this new crew chief pairing, we're able to kind of see him get more consistent. And it's not just a DNF 3 weeks in a row to having a finishing in second place. I want to see him do better and show that he deserves to be on one of the top teams in motorsports.
All right. Well, let's go through from one top team in motorsports to another. Let's talk about Trackhouse. Lots of expectations there.
Oh, yeah.
No changes with that team. Ross Chastain's back in the 1. Daniel Suarez is back in the 99. Both crew chiefs are back. Lots of obviously Trackhouse likes to make headlines whenever they can.
Mhm.
Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez. What are we going to expect from the boys at Trackhouse this year?
Here's what I'm concerned about, Casey. It's they had an outstanding year, and I feel like when you have an outstanding year, the only way you can go is down. And I don't want to say that, but like I don't want us to be like, wow, Ross Chastain, crazy move, wins from both drivers this season. Like the unheard of championship four appearance from a non-top team. I think that would be kind of silly for us to expect going into this year, though I think we would all like to see it. I don't want to call this year a fluke, but I think this year for Trackhouse, they have to prove that last year wasn't a fluke. That's what they're capable of and more. So that's I like to go in with not crazy expectations, but if I have crazy expectations for any driver, any team, it's Trackhouse. I want them to prove that was not a fluke. They belong in the top teams where they are, and they can make another championship four run. Daniel Suarez, I don't know if he's going to be a championship four driver. I'm really not sure. But making it into the playoffs, I don't think that was something I expected. So doing that again, Ross Chastain, seeing if he can advance to the championship four again. But basically, exceeding our expectations or maintaining that you can do the same thing.
All right. Well, let's talk about more teams with big expectations. Of course, that's Petty GMS. Let's talk about that team
Oh,
for a minute. Noah Gragson will be back in the 40. Well, Noah Gragson will be in the 42 this season after coming from the Xfinity series. Eric Jones is back in the 43. He also brought Jimmy Johnson in too, so that's going to be interesting in itself. That's what are we going to expect from that team in 2023? And what are we going to expect from Seven Time when he gets back out there in these cars?
I think what GMS has done as a whole across, the series that they're in, trucks and everything, very smart. They're building for the future, and it shows. You see it with the talent that they've brought on, and especially just kind of, I feel like they're planting the seeds. A lot of teams have started to plant the seeds for future success, and I think they're one of those teams, and that's very smart. I see that with RFK as well. Just as another example for Cup Series in particular. But I'm excited for Jimmy Johnson to be part of that team. That announcement, I don't know if it came out of left field for you, Casey, but it kind of just you know everything, Casey, but I mean, it came out of left field for me and I think a lot of people, but it's exciting, to have Jimmy back in the sport. And I think he will be a great mentor to Eric Jones, to Noah Gragson. For Noah, I think it's a great move for him. I thought he really progressed not only as a driver, but I think as a person, maturity wise, at Junior Motorsports. Sure, there might have been a few moments last season that we can remember where it was like, oh, maybe not the best move on track or off track. But I feel like Noah has really progressed. And I think joining an organization with two seven-time champions and Eric Jones that I think can maybe balance him out a little bit is very interesting. And I think will do him well. I will say on that topic, I don't know about you, but I think the pairing up of Eric Jones and Noah is very interesting. They seem kind of polar opposite to me. So it'll be interesting to see how that teamwork kind of plays out. I'd like to see them maybe do some media appearances and things like that, or just kind of getting out in the media being like, hey, we're a new team. We're kind of changing our face a little bit just from a marketing and like PR and that kind of side of things. But for Eric Jones, he won last year, right? Maybe another win. Let's keep building on that. And then for Jimmy Johnson, I have expectations for him. Obviously, trying to qualify into the Daytona 500. Let's have that happen. Do I think he'll win it? No, but wouldn't that be cool? I think that'd be awesome. But expectations is just to not totally wreck out, show that you're back in the car and that you can do well for Jimmy Johnson. I know he will, but expectations.
Yeah, we'll have to see on that. Let's talk about Colleague next. We have lots of not much changes. Well, AJ Allmendinger's back full time with Colleague in the 16, and then of course Justin Haley returns to the 31. What are we going to expect from Colleague this year?
I think what they did last year with rotating out Daniel Hemrick, AJ Allmendinger, and Noah Gragson was smart. I think kind of behind the scenes, they're like, okay, we want this 16 car to be a full-time car in Cup Series. Who do we have fill that? And obviously when I forget which announcement came out first, but you saw the domino effects kind of fall into place, I should say.
Yeah.
AJ going back full time, I think is smart. I'm gonna miss him in the Xfinity series because you could tell he was having the time of his life. He was winning left and right. He had great finishes, and I don't know. There was something about him in Xfinity that I loved, and I hope he can continue that energy and kind of that mindset going into Cup. There's a lot more pressure. Since last that we've seen him in the Cup Series, we might see a different AJ Allmendinger. I'm not really sure, but for him, kind of the same approach I'm taking with Kyle Busch is maybe zero expectations, but we also understand that he has raced in that Cup car for that team, so he at least knows what he's doing a little bit. It's a matter of how can he do in a full-time run with that team. And that car, it's not a bad car. It's not like the worst equipment in the world. It's not the best, but we saw Noah Gragson do great things, particularly in person at Michigan until, he had some issues. But, we saw that car do great things. So I think AJ can elevate that for Justin Haley, keeping on elevating that equipment. I feel like his name popped up more this year than it has years past. Obviously got a rain delayed win at Daytona. A few years back, but I want to see him making more of those headlines, being like, wow, Justin Haley, like top 10, something we didn't expect. I want to see him continue to do that, but also maybe not make that such a surprising thing, I think. So bring Colleague back kind of into mainstream for Cup Series is kind of what I want to see for them, just getting good results.
All right. Well, let's talk about the next team, JTG Doherty Racing. You reminded me of that. We were almost going to forget about them.
Yeah.
But we remembered them. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Of course, will be back in the 47. He will have a new crew chief, but like as always, it's a familiar face to Ricky Stenhouse. Mike Kelly will be the crew chief this year. Of course, Brian Patty is in the Truck Series with KBM on the 51 team. Of course, Stenhouse and Mike Kelly have worked together in the past. They won the Xfinity Series championship together when they were both at what was known as Roush Fenway. What are we expecting from JTG this year? Because they had some strong runs as well.
Yeah, I will say last year for me was not the year of Stenhouse. He struggled left and right. Once you thought he was going to do well, he didn't. Or maybe he did great in stage 1 and stage 2, fell out in stage 3, or maybe it was the total opposite. But I don't want to see him struggling as much because we've seen that he can put together really consistent runs. But I also think him and the crew chief pairing this year, winning the Xfinity Series championship together and having that history, it's not going to be, I don't want to say it's not going to be a huge change for that team, but I think it'll be a work in progress and a positive change, knowing that they've worked together and had success. I think that team might want to forget a little bit of what happened last year. You saw the wrecks and you saw the spins, and Stenhouse can do better than that. I don't know what it was last year. I want to see them do better. And perhaps on a personal note, the paint schemes maybe just a little better too. Just a little.
Okay. Yeah. Always enjoy working with my friends at JTG. So looking forward to talking with them. Maybe we'll try to get Ricky Stenhouse Jr. on this channel. So you never know. Let's go to Spire. Of course, they made some headlines as well. Corey LaJoie's back in the 7. Ty Dillon is in the 77 this year. Of course, he was at Petty GMS last year in the 42. He jumps over to Spire. What are we going to see from that team? This is the first time that team has had 2 drivers full time.
That's a concerning team for me this year. Just one, it kind of gives me the same vibes, just a little bit different of like the teammates of Ty and Corey LaJoie. That's very odd to me. And then when you look at GMS too, we have, Noah and Eric, and that teaming feels really off to me. I don't know how they're going to blend together with, Ty and Corey, how they're going to blend together as teammates. And obviously, it's a big team and then the smaller teams, kind of every man for himself, but you have to work together in some respect. And for Ty Dillon, he's been on a journey the past few years. I want him to prove that he deserves to be in the Cup Series full time. What we can expect with a full-time 77 car, how it will perform, I don't know. He's another driver that I'm kind of going into with expectations that are minimal and more so just seeing, all right, what are his stats last year versus this year? Has he improved? How is he blending well with the team? Because I don't know if you felt this way too, but I really didn't feel like him with GMS, Petty GMS was a great fit. You kind of felt it. And then obviously when the news came out that he wasn't returning, he just kind of was like, it just wasn't a good fit, didn't match, but we, respectfully kind of separated. So just saying like, hey, I deserve to be in the Cup Series full time. I really do wish that he would have maybe looked, if there was an Xfinity spot open, I think he would have done much better on that, maybe a truck ride, but he's in Cup, just showing that he earned that. And then for Corey LaJoie, he had a close call at Atlanta. He could have won last year. He really could have. So bringing that back to Atlanta this year, maybe, but even just showing that drive, we know that he is a driver that he's very hungry for a win. He's hungry for the top 10 success. I want to see that from him this year as well.
Okay, one last team to talk about. Of course, it's the only team in the Cup Series that I believe has switched manufacturers this year. Of course, that is Live Fast Motorsports. Of course, BJ McLeod, and also it was announced Josh Bilicki is going to be, those two drivers are going to be in that 78 car. What are we going to expect from them?
I think the manufacturer switch is smart. Going to Chevy, correct?
Yes.
Going to Chevy. I mean, if you look at the stats, you saw that Chevy almost kind of blew everyone out of the water last year. I think it's a good move. I think it's a step towards success. Obviously, the team, again, we're talking about equipment here. We're not going to expect them to have top 10, top fives every single weekend, but I think we're going to see better things out of them, more consistency. It's all in that manufacturer change. And if that's good for the team or not, I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, it is. All right. One last thing. What are your just overall thoughts about the Cup Series this year? And what do you think we're going to see? Are we going to see an unpredictable year like we saw last year? Or are we going to see someone dominate? Or what are we going to see from there? There's a couple new tracks. Of course, we got that All-Star race in North Wilkesboro. And of course, the Chicago Street Course is obviously on top of mind. Really, outside of that, there really wasn't any big changes with the Cup Series schedule this year.
Yeah, so overall expectations, last year was fun in this fact that we never knew what was going to happen. And I thought that was really fun. It was fun to report on, it was fun to do stories on. And this year, as much as I would love, the unpredictability, and it brought, I think, a lot of new fans in as well. I think we're going to see a tamer year, and I think we're really going to see who figured out this Gen 7 car and who didn't. Last year was all about learning. This year is all about, all right, here's what we know. Obviously, they're making some changes to the car just for safety purposes, and hopefully safety is not a negative storyline this year. Hopefully it's a positive, and hey, NASCAR fixed the safety issues. We're not seeing concussions. We're not seeing injuries. That needs to be, I don't want to see that this year. If we see that this year, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. Hopefully another thing that NASCAR has really looked at during the off season is the tires. I don't want as many tire issues as we saw last year. Granted, the beginning of the season, it made sense, right? But when we got to the playoffs, again, teams might have messed with tire pressure and everything like that. But I don't want to see tires failing on us or, things like that. Also, loose tires, teams not getting the tires on all the way. I want to see less of that as well with the single lug. But again, last year was a learning period. I expect this year for teams and drivers to be more comfortable in their machines, less mistakes, hopefully. And I think we'll see a tamer year. As many wins as we saw last year, absolutely not. I think that'd be awesome, but I don't think so. So expectations going into 2023, things calming down in a good way, in a positive way. But I don't think we'll see a single driver dominate as well. To answer your other question, I don't think we'll see that again.
All right. Well, Taylor Kitchen, thank you as always for coming on. And this has been the NASCAR Cup Series preview. We'll have the truck preview in a few weeks. Just got to wait for a few more rides to get confirmed. And of course, we'll have our ARCA Menard Series preview once we get closer to the test. That, of course, next week. So we're already rolling. Of course, Rolex 24. We'll have the IndyCar preview as well. Yeah. All right. We'll talk to you soon.